This is the next part of the 023 MS250 rebuild. It's also relevant to the 250s, etc. All of that similar range. Anyway, we get rid of that because that's a window frame, and there's a series of videos about that coming up. Home milled timber to window frames. So where were we? The 023. We've got the cylinder in the frame, and on the 026 rebuild we did at some point have a question about the handle centering spring on an 023. So whilst we're here, let's have the side case off and have a look. Time to zoom in, I think. Right, here we are. Change the glasses. That's better. They're a bit dusty. Been in the workshop, been doing a bit of joinery. Ah, there you go. Now then, the chain brake business is under here. So there's one screw there and one screw there. And then this cover pops off. And they're normally really full of muck. But this isn't too bad. And very difficult to see, but the centering spring on these, on the 026 there's a little coil spring up here. But on these it's a little flat spring in amongst all this gubbins. And I'm going to do a really close up zoom in. Let's find something to wedge the saw up there. There we go. And let's zoom in. Bit tricky this, but there's a bit of a coil there. You might not be able to see it, but there's a bit of a coil of a flat spring, and it goes up this face into the plastic up there. So rather than take this one apart, we shall use a different one. Now here's a different saw. No point taking that apart if we're going to be using that. The spring itself has been misplaced on this one, I think. See, that just flops around, but the chain brake actually works, but that's no good. So what we have here, there's a flat bar here with a C-clip or a circlip on that end. So it's going to be a bit tricky this, but let's zoom in again. So we remove this, the little circlip, and they're quite tricky as usual. And they can go flirting off across the workshop. Okay, there's this spring. We've got to remove that spring, and you need a cloth to do that, and maybe the combi key, and effectively you've just got to lever it off, and the cloth stops it springing everywhere. There we go. So now we've removed the violence inherent in the system. Sounds a bit like Monty Python, that. Help, help, I'm being repressed. So take that little washer off, and this whole chain brake assembly should come off. And it just eases off one after the other because it's on 2 pins. So there we go. That's the chain brake, which just hooks out, goes in there, round there, and that end there goes in there. You put it in sideways like that. If that's the right way around. It sits in there. So there's the spring. The offending spring. And this one didn't seem to be working. Let's just ease this out. And there we go. That is the spring. And it runs on there. See if we can get that. It just runs on there as that turns. So I suspect this one here is bent. Why it's bent, I don't know. And you'd have to give this a serious cleaning up to be able to work out what's going on. So that goes in there. Ah, that's why it's been put in wrong. Can you see? Let me just get this out again. When it was fitted, it was down there like that. And it actually wants to go up there like that. So this one will work if we can just pop this back together. Rather than you watching me struggle to get this on, I blew this out with the airline, put that spring in the right place, then fitted the chain brake handle and the pivot. And what you have to do is you have to get this in place and then just put a screwdriver down the front and just compress the spring outwards and drop this in place. But look, it springs back in place now, which is perfect. So the next thing to do, inspect the chain brake band for wear, which would be cracks or areas of bluing, thinned areas, stuff like that. And then there's a pin through it there, so that goes there, okay? But first of all, you pop that in the, for want of a better word, the yoke, and then it goes in there, just like that. That must be really nice and clean before you do that, and I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. So then you've got this link which goes on there and it gets pushed forward because the hole is sort of pear-shaped, so it's supposed to lock in place. A bit like life, really. Except we've forgotten something. There's a spacer there. Goes there. And then that goes there. Then the C-clip. Now, if we lose this at this point, I'm not really fussed. Put a cloth on there so to stop yourself from stabbing yourself. Now this next bit's the important bit. So on the 026 rebuild, I really didn't show what I was doing. So there's the spring. Hook either end, but the long hooky bit goes this end. So that hooks in there. Now then, there's a difference between there and there, and you need to get that on there. So effectively what you do is you put a screwdriver in there and do that, but you put a cloth over it in case it springs over. And I'm going to try and do it without the cloth so you can maybe see what goes on. There we go. Hopefully you saw that. And then we've got a chain brake that works and it centres. So on these occasional user or semi-professionals, the chain brake handle return spring is not a little coil spring, it's a little flat spring. And then what you do, clean everything up and of course put the cover back on. And this is filthy, but and then a screw there and a screw there.